Hi everyone, today I'm going to be covering Chapter 38, which discusses iteration and the iterative design process. So to begin, iteration, as the textbook defines it, is the act of repeating a process or a step in a process over and over again with the aim of approaching a desired goal, target, or result. Each time a step is repeated with the hopes of getting closer to a desired result is an iteration. The more iterations made, the more improvements and changes are made to a design. Iterative design is based on a cyclical process that often focuses on improving and refining the functionality of a design based on feedback, but designers can also look at making adjustments that can decrease production costs, which is called productability. Simply put, iterations are just small incremental improvements to a design that are guided by user feedback. Iterative design is the process of identifying these changes and seeing how effective they are once implemented. As mentioned, the iterative design process follows a cyclical pattern that typically looks like producing a design, creating a prototype of that design, testing it out and seeking feedback, and then ultimately using that feedback to create an improved version of the design, or an iteration. This process is repeated as many times as needed until the desired functionality is achieved. It is also important to note that iterations can be made at any point throughout the design process. Typically, iterations occur more rapidly early in the design process since it's easier to identify problems and the changes are typically less expensive to be made. During the iterative design process, evaluation of the prototype often typically includes a focus group. This group should be made up of a mix of people that are familiar and invested in the prototype, but should also include people who aren't associated with the project, but do have a rudimentary understanding of the topic being evaluated. After the focus group gives feedback, that feedback becomes the basis for the next iteration of the prototype. There are multiple benefits associated with the iterative design process. The first is that it allows designers to obtain feedback from actual people. These experiences also allow the designer to see how the user interacts with their product and see where changes need to be made. Another is that it allows the designer to catch design flaws early on. Designers aren't waiting until the last minute to test their designs. Instead, they can see what works and what doesn't early on in the design process. It also allows the designer to produce a more refined and finished product. Because the designers are continually testing and making changes to the product, they aren't likely to be putting something on the market that has never been tested before or only used a few times. Improvements to those failure points that they identified have already been made in the process. Finally, this approach tends to be more cost-effective because tons of money isn't being poured into something that might not work. Instead, low-fidelity prototyping can be used until the designers have a more elaborate plan of their design. As far as using iterative design in the classroom goes, I believe that there are multiple ways that this concept could be integrated into instruction, regardless of the content that you teach. One way to integrate the iterative design process into your classroom is by allowing for multiple drafts or iterations of projects or assignments to be turned in prior to the due date. This way, students can get feedback from you before they turn in their final project. They can also see where they need to make improvements. Similarly, you could provide time for students to give peer feedback. This way, students can get another peer's view on their work. One thing that I like to do in my classroom is 2 glows and a grow, where students tell their peers 2 things that they like about their work and 1 improvement that they think could be made. The idea of allowing multiple iterations to be turned in while also providing feedback could be done with lengthier math problems, writing assignments, project-based learning opportunities, or even group project. That way, students can see that great work doesn't happen on the first try, and that it's important to be able to identify areas of improvement and then act upon it to make a better product. More specifically to my class, I think that I could spend more time on the iterative design process during design challenges. While my students often reflect on their building and give peers feedback at the end of a challenge, I don't give them time to meet with other groups and get feedback prior to that. I think it would be very beneficial to give my students time set aside prior to our presentation time that they could meet with other groups, obtain feedback, and make changes to their design based on the feedback that they receive. A final way that iterative design could be used in the classroom is by teachers, using it to improve their classroom instruction. By making it a habit of seeking out feedback from students and using their results to drive instruction, we are not only improving our instruction by identifying what isn't working and acting on it, but we are also modeling the relevance and importance of iterative design to students so they can see it in action. Overall, I believe that iterative design holds a valuable spot not just in the engineering world, but also in our classrooms. Regardless of the content or grade level you teach, I believe that we can all find a way to help students understand that all products are a work in progress, and that by gaining feedback and making improvements, we can create iterations that lead to a more refined product, even if it's not on the first try.